Welcome to Everyday Grace TV, where there is story, there is grace. I'm Mary Andrioli.
And I'm Jay Locklear. On our last episode of Everyday Grace TV, we asked some hard questions about racism by holding up a mirror to whiteness. Where we ended was with the question, why would we take the risk?
On this episode, we'll explore the stories of justice makers who take the risk to end racism as leaders in the United Methodist Church. We'll speak with Hannah Adair Bonner, Curator of Shout, a spoken word poetry and activist faith community in Houston, Texas.
We'll also be speaking with Lisa Yebuah, one of the pastors at Edenton Street United Methodist Church, Otis Hardy, a lay minister, and Margaret Brunson, a storyteller. And
we'll speak with our beloved biblical storyteller, Belton Joyner. If you'd like to be a part of Everyday Grace TV, you can follow us on Twitter at Everyday Grace TV or like us on Facebook. Next up, Hannah Adair Bonner.
Good morning, my beautiful kings and queens. It is Friday, April 10th, 2015. It's kind of chilly out here this morning, so hopefully you bundled up. Kings and queens, someone proposed me with the question the other day, and I'm a little stuck on it. I was asked, was I trying to racially unite or racially incite? Well, honestly, I feel that my goal is to racially unite. Now, in the process of doing that, some people will be incited, i.e. upset, because based on the history of America, it is not good when it comes to black and white people.
Welcome back to Everyday Grace TV. We are here with Hannah Adair Bonner, who is in Houston, Texas. Hannah, welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Hannah, it's my understanding that you are the curator of The Shout, a spoken word poetry activist faith community. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about The Shout.
So shout is the first word of Isaiah 58. Which is a passage that really calls and summons people to a life of justice. In the passage, people speak about the fact that they're fasting and praying and doing all these religious rituals, but they're not getting God's attention. And in that sense, I feel like it really matches the heart of my generation, that often can be frustrated with the religious ritual, much like Wesley was when he was a young person. Frustrated with the religious ritual and seeking to see the church take action. And in Isaiah 58, God says, if you want my attention, the fast that I choose, not the fast that you choose, the fast that I choose as God is to loose the bonds of injustice and to let the oppressed go free and to break every yoke. And when you see the hungry, to feed them. When you see the naked, to cover them. When you see the homeless, to bring them into your home and not to hide yourself from your own kin. And so the shout is an attempt. It has over the course of the past year been what I call the solidarity building arm of St. John's downtown, and it's an attempt to create a space in the community where people, whether they're in church or not in church, whether they have had difficult experiences with church that lead them to not want to be there, whether they've never been connected to a church, but where they can agree that they feel a calling to loose the bonds of injustice and to let the oppressed go free, where folks can come together from all parts of the community and rally around God's call to justice. That is the community that we seek to create. And Isaiah was a spoken word prophet, was a spoken word prophet, and he wrote poetry that was intended to be performed orally, to be delivered to the people orally in a way that was compelling, which is what modern spoken word prophets do. And so the goal of the shout is to find those voices that are out there crying in the wilderness and to bring together an audience to hear them.
Goodness, well, thank you so much for sharing. Hannah, as you know, we're talking about folks who are taking a risk to end racism, and on July 10th, I know, as you well know, Sandra Bland was arrested for allegedly assaulting an officer doing a routine traffic stop. And on July 13th, she was found dead in her cell in Waller County Jail. Hannah, can you share with viewers what happened to you, to your heart, when you heard Sandra Bland's story?
Yes. a lot of our a lot of our poets, our DJ, our dancers, a lot of folks that are involved in the Shout are Prairie View alumni, and a lot of them are the same age as Sandra Bland, and went to school with her. And so they very quickly found out what had happened, that something had happened, and that their friends from Prairie View were starting to ask the question, what happened to Sandra Bland? And so one of our poets, Jeremiah, the Fluent One Payne, he came to me with that question, what happened to Sandra Bland? And as he tells it, he didn't really know what to do, but he said he knew that I would know what to do. Throughout that day, kind of looking around and feeling like something needs to happen, this woman's life needs to be honored. And finally, as I was leaving Bible study that night, I was with a young man named Reese Caraway, and he said, well, he knew that I was very agitated and feeling like something concrete needed to happen to honor this woman's life, to make sure that that people could see that her life was one that people were willing to ask that question about, what happened to Sandra Bland. And so he said, we could go there. And I said, sure, when? And he said, now. And I said, sure. So we got a votive candle, and we wrote what happened to Sandra Bland on it, and we went there. We arrived at the jail at about 10 o'clock at night on a gravelly back road, and we put the candle out there and lit it, and someone came and blew it out, and so we lit it again. And we anointed the threshold with oil, and we prayed. And we went home, and the next day it felt like we were supposed to come back, and then it kept feeling like we were supposed to come back, until we were seeking to hold vigil, to be present until Sandra's family could come and receive her body. And when her family came, I looked into her sister's eyes, and all I could say was, as I was preparing to pray at this vigil that they had come to, I'll do this as long as you need me to, was what came out. And so that's the commitment that I made to them. And God has shown up in magnificent, marvelous ways for us over the past, this is day 33, that I'm here in Waller County, actually, right next to the jail, as I speak to you. So God has shown up in amazing ways. And Sandra Bland I see her as a social justice activist, and also as an evangelist of the AME movement, because her videos did both. Her videos shared with people that they deserve to live with justice, and they also shared with people that God loves them. She wanted people to understand that God loved them. And so I see her as both a social justice activist and as an evangelist of the Methodist movement. And so I feel extremely called to have seen a sister in arms to have fallen, to make sure that her life is honored and that her message and her work continues.
Hannah, can you share a little bit about some of the obstacles that you have faced in standing vigil at Waller County Jail?
Well, number one is the heat. It is excruciating. About a weekend, I got a lot of messages from folks about how red my face was, so I have a hat now. But the heat is, it makes it quite a physical endeavor to have done this for 33 days. Certainly there's folks within the community that see us as outside agitators. To me, Sandra Bland, they say that we're not from here, but Jesus often went into communities that he was not from, as have all of our church leaders. Yep. And Sandra Bland was also not from here. And so if we kept the fact that we're not from here to prevent us from honoring her, then that would not be within the gospel message or the gospel calling. So that has definitely been a little bit of an obstacle. And just the I guess lack of understanding amongst folks about why we're here. That this isn't a personal attack on the woman who walks by us each day. But this is more about justice and about Sandra Bland's life, and about her life needing to be honored and her message needing to be honored, and her name to not be just a puff of smoke that disappears quickly from our consciousness, but a name that remains because she was a powerful woman who lived a powerful life, and she deserves to be honored and remembered. And she deserves for justice to come.
What are some things that we can do you think, to be supportive of your work?
I certainly, I think that what's important for us is to keep Sandra Bland at the center of this message. That this is about her. It's not about any of us. We are here to be in solidarity with her. And because her voice still goes on, she made so many powerful videos where she gives so many powerful messages about the fact that that you should do the right thing even if you're the only person doing it.
Yeah.
Where she has messages about taking courage and taking action and going out and doing something for others, even if you have to do it all by yourself. And her message of that is what has called us here, because in one of her videos she says, "I can't do this alone, I need your help." And we all need to be able to say that, to be willing to take the courage to do the right thing, but also to say, but I also need your help, that we all need to step up. And so I would encourage people to, if they see something in their community that needs to be done, to follow Sandra's example and to step up and do it, even if you're doing it all alone. And to keep playing her videos, to keep supporting her family and her friends. The work that we're doing here, there's certainly some hopes that her family has. They're hoping for a Department of Justice investigation. They're hoping to change the name that she was of the road where she was arrested to Sandra Bland Parkway, so that anyone who's arrested on that road, that officers will get to write Sandra Bland on that ticket. And always remember that as they practice their duties, what happened to her. There is an AME church, Hope AME, because Sandra Bland was an AME member, a very devoted AME member, sang in the choir, was there every Sunday, and she was arrested amazingly on the front, right in front of Hope AME Church, which is just a couple blocks outside of Prairie View University, where she had just was about to begin her new life. And so we definitely are seeking help in terms of taking that place, Hope AME, and making it a place of refuge for students, and for conversation, for refuge. We hope to have that be a place where they feel they can come. And so we definitely need help with transforming that church into a place where the students feel welcome and comfortable. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about long term, for how to honor her life through the way that people live in this community.
Hannah, you talked a little bit about Hope AME, and it reminds me of Hope in general, of course, and I'm wondering if you can share just a little bit, what is your hope for Sandra Bland and for Sandra Bland's story?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that, people often see Christian hope as something that's weak and a crutch, but in fact, hope is an act of defiance in time of difficulty, and it's one of the strongest things in the world, and it's hard to defeat. And that is what we seek to live out in this place and in this time. My hope for Sandra Bland and for her memory is that she will be remembered exactly how her mother wants her to be remembered, as a passionate woman who knew her rights, and who was willing to stand up for others, and was an activist, and that she would be honored as such. I hope that people remember her face from her videos, not her mugshot. I hope they remember her voice when she was saying, "Good morning, my kings and queens," at the beginning of her videos, instead of remembering her voice from the video of her arrest. I hope that people remember her as living, and follow the magnificent example that she set for us as a sister in Christ, as a social activist, and as an evangelist of love.
Hannah, I have one last question for you. I'm curious, for the folks who are sitting and perhaps struggling with or wrestling with, how is it that I can take the risk to end racism? What would you share with those folks? What would you share with all of us for how we can take this risk? Yeah,
for me, it's not a risk, it's a calculated sacrifice. For those of us who have privilege, for those of us, and I will particularly speak to my white colleagues at this point, for those of us that have privilege, that feel like To say that there is a risk means to say that there's a choice. And many of our brothers and sisters do not have a choice about how they're treated in this nation and whether or not they have to make the sacrifices associated with racism. The fact that we have a choice is a privilege, and it's a privilege that is unearned, and is not in God's will, that some would have a choice about whether to deal with racism and others wouldn't. And so I think that it's part of taking up our cross and following, to know what is the right thing to do and to simply do it. Not to count the cost and make a pros and cons list of whether or not we should do the right thing, but to know what's the right thing and simply do it. And if enough of us did that, then things would change.
And know that our hearts are with you and our prayers are with you. And
Thank you so much.
Please share my love with everyone who is there. And as Belton mentioned, again, if you can thank the wonderful neighbor who let you in and let you spend time with us, we're really grateful.
I'll do that for sure. And if you would like, I could send email links to the different funds that the family and the friends have set up in case anybody wants to give in that way.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Welcome back to Everyday Grace TV, where today we're talking about what it means to take the risk to end racism. So welcome, Lisa, Otis, and Margaret. It's good to have you here with us. As we're getting started, why don't you all take just a minute and tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Sure. So my name is Lisa Yebuah, and I serve as the campus pastor of our Southeast Raleigh site at Edenton Street United Methodist Church. Have been on staff at Edenton Street for 6 years. Absolutely love the work that I get to do there.
Wonderful.
My name is Otis Hardy. I am a retired pastor, but yet I serve as a community organizer sponsored by the United Methodist Church in Cary. And I'm honored to be able to have that role to work with great people. Amen.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And I'm Dr. Margaret Brunson. I'm a local community leader, as well as a storyteller, a published author, and a seminar facilitator and speaker in the community.
So all of you mentioned that in some way, shape, or form, you're connected with the church. So let's start right there. What is it that's unique about the church that makes it important in this movement to end racism?
Speaking from my background, that everybody has certain feelings and certain ideals and experiences. All experiences are necessary, to make up a whole. My experiences come from a racist background. I grew up in Islam. My people are Muslims. I had no concept of church, and I didn't even want to be around white people. Right. It wasn't my thing. They just, when I was a kid, I was hanged, and so you carry those burdens, as you go along in life. But it was only when I got in some deep trouble and some difficult problems, and there was nothing else to help me. That is when God began to minister to me, and eventually I listened. I was obedient. And the same persons, the people that I used to hate, I wouldn't walk behind a white man. I would never look one in their face, which was against the law. But yet, on April 9th, 1994, was a Saturday afternoon, a police officer forced me to go to a church, and was a white pastor, and was a white church. And I sat there, and God ministered to me. He opened a door for me. First time in my life that I've ever been to the church. So you're saying the church is unique? Yes, the church is unique. It is greatly unique. God called the church into existence. If God called the church into existence, there's no racism. There's no racism in the kingdom of God. That's something that someone else done put over the corner.
Right.
So, and that's what changed my life. It was the church, the people that displayed love, the very thing that I hated. God intentionally would take a blessing and tied up in that.
I just want to piggyback on that. I think for me, understanding that race is a social construct, and that in so many other cultures and places, race is not an issue. The church is unique in that the message of the church is the love of Christ. So love is not a construct. Love is something that's real, something that's tangible. Love is an action, and love was put here by God. And so the church, being a place of love and being a place of healing, can disrupt what society has constructed in terms of race, in terms of how we see each other, how we treat each other. And so the church is uniquely positioned in the world to be a disruption to the world and to the ways of the world. And so I think that's what makes the church so unique in being able to address the problem of racism.
Amen.
Disrupt. I like that word. Lisa?
When Margaret was talking about race being a construct, I think about how the practices of the church help to deconstruct the things that are myths, because the very nature of the church, our practices, we tell really good stories. We're good storytellers. And I feel like that's maybe one of the major ways that the church is uniquely positioned, is that we help to tell really good stories. We tell narratives correctly. We help to dismantle myths when we say that certain people have a particular kind of intellect or a particular kind of beauty or a particular kind of aggression versus other people who don't have aggression. The church says, no, we tell true stories. In the beginning, God created all people, breathed into us the breath of life. And so how do we begin to tell truthful narratives?
Those are all very powerful answers. And in that, hearing about stories and realities and being authentic, one of the things that we've tried to do here at Everyday Grace TV from the beginning is to be authentic and to share stories. So I want to ask all three of you, where have you seen some leaders who have taken that risk to end racism, or maybe ways that you yourselves have been a part of that risk-taking to end racism?
So I'll start here. I think one thing I've observed recently is leaders who actually talk about race. I think we have such a difficult time in this country actually talking about race. We talk about race amongst our own, so to speak, our own people.
Sure.
But we have such a difficult time talking to other people or other races about race.
Well, the church has great responsibilities in so far as racism, social work, and etc. But I truly believe that this is the most valuable time in life of the church. I have seen many changes. I come from an era where I was not allowed to go in the front door for years. I mean, so those things I was in many ways. But I look back at it now, and once I become a member of the church, I hate to keep saying I'm saved and like I'm Holy Ghost, but once I came into that knowledge, I was just asked a question the other day about when did I give my life to Christ. Mm-hmm. Well, I told him, I said, that is something that doesn't pertain to me, because I didn't give my life to Christ. I didn't have no life to give. I gave him my death. He gave me life. So I understand that I didn't have nothing. I have that mentality. And the church has the same mentality. The church has the mentality is that we're constantly looking for something that's nothing. We're looking for something that's nothing in order to put life in it.
Jay, I think that if you had asked me this question maybe 6 months ago, my first instinct would say, there's, Reverend Vernon Tyson, who's a member of my church, who's such a courageous leader to end racism. And he definitely, we stand on his shoulders in regards to just many of the bold ways that he spoke out and loved people and was a prophetic voice when I think a lot of other voices were silent. But I would say in the last 6 months, many of the conversations that we have about racism have felt a lot more personal to me. And it's been actually a real struggle how to separate myself as pastor and separate myself as one who, when I walk into a room, people see me as a Black woman. And what does that mean for different people and how they construct narratives for who I am? So I've been probably in a really fragile and vulnerable place. And so looking at courageous leaders, for me, it's like finding those folks who actually make space for my story and allow me to be really shaken and sad and angry and upset and, just trying to figure out what does it look like for us to see each other rightly. And so I do want to just, something Margaret was sharing, that at Edenton Street, we've been watching movies that have really been stretching us, and we've been in the midst of these conversations called Racial Taboo. And let's see, last Tuesday, I was sitting beside one of my members, and we were watching this documentary called There Are Many Rivers to Cross, and there were lots of images of lynchings, talking about how the Reconstruction period, African Americans were promised things and then they were taken away, how our Constitution was beginning to be tweaked in ways that it was not going to work out for those who were Black or of African descent. And after the film, one of my members said to me, Lisa, was that difficult for you to watch, the lynchings, like knowing that people would make all these promises, the Emancipation Proclamation, we tout it all the time, and yet it didn't really mean a lot in regards to tangible practices. Right. And I said to her, I think I've just come to, accept this as this is just the story, and this is what has gotten us here to 2015. And then she says, well, Lisa, if it was difficult for you to watch, I just need to share with you that it was also difficult for me to watch. So I can only imagine what it must feel like for you. I went to bed that night thinking that meant more to me than a lot of other things that I've seen, like on Facebook or Twitter, that someone who sits in my congregation who does not look like me, who has privilege and also proximity to lots of other kind of privilege, right. She would choose to sit on the mourner's bench with me for a second. And I've been using that term over and over again, that I just sometimes need my brothers and sisters who are not African American to just stop and really listen to what I have to say about why some things really make me sad. To me, it's very courageous to quiet yourself and to listen to another individual and to maybe enter into their experience.
Indeed. Our prayer and our hope from the beginning of Everyday Grace TV is that we would reach people who are inside the walls of the church, but also outside the walls of the church as well. So the last question that I want to ask and hear from all of you is, for somebody who is not a part of a community of faith, somebody who for a number of reasons may find themselves sort of outside the walls, what can that person do to be a part of this conversation and this movement to end racism?
So, I shared that from a church perspective. I feel like the church is really good at telling stories, but stories are universal. I mean, if you have never darkened the door of a church, you probably have the crazy uncle who shares stories at the Thanksgiving table. You can remember the favorite story that your mom or your dad told you at night. We even narrate our autobiography when we are filling out our college applications about who we are. And I think that one of the best ways maybe for someone who's not a person of faith to end racism is to learn again how to tell stories well of other people. And that starts with first learning people's stories. And not just what we learn in history classes, right. But to take some time to have real friendships that may stretch you a little bit to understand where people are coming from. So I think that if people can learn to tell people's stories correctly, that might be one way that we start to see each other correctly.